Hello, Namaskar. This is Firstpost and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. We begin tonight with a statement from Iran, where the Supreme Leader has spoken about the status of Muslims in India, an unsubstantiated claim that India has challenged. But this episode is not the first of its kind, and it shows why the India-Iran relationship hasn't really taken off despite so much history. We'll discuss that tonight. Staying with India, there's a wave of IPOs. More people are investing in stocks, but the government fears that some of it is more like gambling. We'll explain. Delhi has a new chief minister. We decode the politics behind Arvind Kejriwal's resignation. In the US, new body cam footage of Donald Trump's shooter is out. We look at the aftermath of the second assassination attempt. The US is pushing for reform of the United Nations, but it's a trick. A Hindu temple is vandalized in New York days before Prime Minister Modi's meeting with the Indian diaspora there. European leaders are working on ways to curb immigration and hoping to learn from Italy. Amazon is ending work from home, and how investing in women can save the world trillions of dollars. All this and more coming up. The headlines first. The US approves possible military sale of spare parts to Taiwan. The deal is worth more than $200 million. Taiwan says it will become effective within a month. The arms sale package comes amid rising tensions with China. Washington is Taipei's most important supporter and arms supplier. Gunmen attack a military police base in Mali's capital. Gunfire and explosions heard in Bamako. The airport has been closed. Mali has called it a terrorist attack but says the situation is now under control. The West African country has been under military rule since 2020. In India, schools and colleges reopen. In Manipur, internet services also restored in the 5 districts after a week-long ban. Earlier this month, fresh clashes erupted in the northeastern state. The ethnic conflict in Manipur began in May 2023. Since then, more than 200 people have been killed and thousands have become homeless. Meta bans Russian state media outlets from its apps around the world. The owner of Facebook and Instagram cites foreign interference for this step. It comes after the US announced sanctions against RT and other Moscow-controlled media. The Kremlin calls Meta's ban unacceptable. And Donald Trump launches a cryptocurrency platform but provides very few details about it. His son labels the family venture as, and I'm quoting, the start of a financial revolution. During his presidency, Trump had called cryptocurrencies a scam, but since then he's radically changed his position. Do you know the worst sort of criticism? That which comes from your friends, especially when it's unfounded. You want to clap back at them, but at the same time, you don't want to spoil the friendship. That's India and Iran right now. Iran's supreme leader has leveled some serious allegations against India. He says Indian Muslims are suffering. Of course, New Delhi has hit back at the claim. The foreign ministry says, look who is talking. I know it sounds like a typical diplomatic tiff, but there's more at play here. It's a reflection of where India-Iran ties are at. So tonight, we are taking a closer look at this relationship. But first, the controversy. This is Islamic Unity Week in Iran, so the Supreme Leader gathered some of the top religious scholars. Listen to what he told them, and I'm quoting, "We cannot consider ourselves to be Muslims if we are oblivious to the suffering that a Muslim is enduring in Myanmar, Gaza, India, or any other place." He mentioned 3 names. Gaza, where 40,000 Muslims have been killed by Israel. Myanmar, where 700,000 Muslims were expelled, and then India in the same bracket. The comparison makes no sense whatsoever. India has the 3rd largest Muslim population in the world. There are more Muslims in India than in Iran, and their rights are guaranteed by a secular constitution. Yet Iran clubs India with Gaza. It's clearly a political statement, one that is supposed to appease the Supreme Leader's supporters, but New Delhi has hit back. Look at the Foreign Ministry statement, and I'm quoting again, "We strongly deplore the comments made regarding minorities in India by the Supreme Leader of Iran. Countries commenting on minorities are advised to look at their own record before making any observations about others." It is a fair point. Iran is a Shia Muslim country. Sunni Muslims are treated as second-class citizens there. They make up just 10% of the population. Sunnis, they're 10% of the population. Top Sunni clerics have accused the regime of discrimination. In fact, there isn't a single Sunni mosque in Tehran. Do you know why? Because the regime won't allow it. If this is how Iran treats Muslim minorities, you can imagine the rest. Yet the Supreme Leader targets India, and it's not a first. In 2017, he called Kashmir an oppressed nation. In 2019, he criticized India's decision to cancel Kashmir's special status. He called it an ugly act. And in 2020, he said Muslims are being massacred in India. Each time, New Delhi hit back. But this is a very sensitive issue for India because Iran is not Turkey or Pakistan. We have strong and long-standing ties with them. Back in 2001, India and Iran signed a defense cooperation deal. Until 2018, Iran was India's second largest oil supplier and India was Iran's second biggest client. So it was a win-win relationship, which is why New Delhi decided to build a port in Iran, the Chabahar port. Talks began way back in 2003, but it's taken a long time to sign a deal. Earlier this year, India and Iran inked a 10-year agreement. India will invest $120 million in Chabahar. It will also give $250 million in loans. For both countries, this is a big deal. Iran gets much needed investments amid sanctions and India gets access to a key port. Chabahar can be India's gateway to Central Asia and Afghanistan. So the business side is sorted. And the history is even better. Cultural ties between India and Iran go back centuries. Until 1947, we shared a direct border. So both sides know each other pretty well. There is no cultural or civilizational gap. Then what explains this frequent animosity? Well, it's largely because of politics, both internal and external. Whenever India and Iran gain momentum, something happens. In 2018, it was US sanctions. Donald Trump cut off Iran from the oil market, so India stopped buying Iranian oil. Even Indian investments were put on hold. To beat this isolation, Iran turned to China. They signed a massive investment deal in 2021. China has promised to invest $400 billion in Iran. Let me repeat that, $400 billion over 25 years. So Iran has clearly picked sides in this conflict. It is Team China, which makes it complicated for India. Then you have the Gaza war. After the Hamas attack, India expressed support for Israel. New Delhi also defended Israel's right to hit back. Chances are that did not go down well with Iran. And we've seen that before. I mentioned the Supreme Leader's Kashmir criticism in 2017. That coincided with Prime Minister Modi's trip to Israel. So the big picture is quite clear. Yes, Iran values its relations with India, but not enough to stop these unwarranted comments. It's a political choice, not a religious one. Why else would Iran be silent on China's Uyghur genocide? That's a real crime against Muslims. China has detained more than 1 million Uyghurs in labor camps. Yet Iran's Supreme Leader has nothing to say about it. India has handled his outbursts maturely. They haven't affected the strategic cooperation, but it does show why this relationship has never really taken off. This is how several retail traders start their mornings. They wake up in anticipation as the market opens, their screens come to life. For hours, they remain glued to their stock trading portals, hunting for the next big opportunity. And once they find it, they place their bets. If the stock price climbs, the bet has paid off and the market keeps them hooked. Once they see a profit, they keep coming back to their trading apps over and over again. This is called stock trading. But increasingly, it's borderline gambling. For a lot of retail investors, the lines are blurred and they're hooked on to a new trend these days, thanks to the latest wave of IPOs. Before we discuss it, Let's get a basic question out of the way. What is an IPO? It stands for Initial Public Offering, IPO. When a company lists on a stock exchange, when a company enters the market for the first time, it offers its shares to the public, and the first such offering of shares is called an IPO, Initial Public Offering. And retail investors find it very appealing. They see an IPO as the next big money-making opportunity. We have a recent example. This week, Bajaj Housing Finance made its debut. This is a financial services company. It gives out loans to buy properties. Bajaj had a bumper listing in India. Its IPO was oversubscribed by 64 times. Now, what does that mean? What is an oversubscription? It means that there were far more buyers than the shares on offer. If Bajaj was offering 100 shares, there were 6,400 buyers. In other words, for every share that Bajaj had to sell, there were 64 buyers. The total bids were worth a whopping $39 billion. Obviously, Bajaj could not take all this money. It did not have shares worth $39 billion to offer. It wanted to raise just about $782 million. So the IPO was oversubscribed. Now, when this happens, the available shares are divided proportionally among all investors. So all those who applied to buy Bajaj shares will end up getting some shares, but far less than what they wanted. For example, if you wanted 10 shares, you might end up with just 2 or 3. It would depend on demand and supply. The more an IPO is oversubscribed, the fewer shares you'll get. And that's what happened with Bajaj. They went public yesterday with a bang. Overnight, the company's value has more than doubled. Before the listing, Bajaj was worth $7 billion. After the listing, the company's value has jumped to $16 billion. And that also means massive gains for investors. During the IPO, one share of Bajaj was priced at around 70 rupees. Today, it was trading at around 180 rupees. So what you bought for 70 rupees yesterday, you can sell for 180 rupees today. Look at the spike in value. Bajaj is India's 4th biggest major listing now, and this has been the trend this year. 2024 has been a big year for IPOs in India. More than 200 companies have gone public in the last 8 months. They've raised over $8 billion by selling their shares to investors. And this IPO frenzy is far from over. There are more listings in the pipeline, including some high-profile names like delivery aggregator Swiggy, electronics giant LG, and car maker Hyundai. The Indian units of LG and Hyundai are going public. As of now, they're privately held. When they go public, they raise money from the stock market. And how much money are they looking at? Each IPO could be worth over $1 billion. Global investors are tracking all of this. Last year, India became the world's 2nd largest IPO market, right behind mainland China. Meaning India is an attractive investment destination for the world. As more companies enter the field, India's stock markets are also expanding in size. They're challenging their global peers. It's a good trend, a trend worth building on. But here's the other side of the story. It features the retail investors, the ones I spoke about in the beginning. Their appetite for risky bets is growing. They see the stock market boom as an opportunity to make quick money. And some are even risking their savings and suffering losses because of it. India's market regulator recently conducted a study, that's SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board of India. It's the market regulator. They held a study, and the findings are quite revealing. Most retail investors sell their IPO shares quickly. 54% of the investors sell their shares within a week. 70% sell them within a year. So they're not buying into these IPOs for the long term, and this kind of trading has seen a surge. We have some more data. About a third of individual investors trade on an intraday basis, meaning if they buy a stock, they sell it on the same day before the market closes. That's intraday trading. 6 years back, just 1.5 million traders in India did this. 1.5 million traders did intraday trading. Last year, the number of intraday traders shot up to a whopping 6.9 million. Now, most of these traders are young. 48% of them are below 30 years of age, and most of them are losing money. Last year, 7 out of 10 traders lost money in intraday trading. That's 70% of them losing money. What do these numbers tell you? This is not trading, it's gambling. And the government of India agrees with this assessment. It says, and I'm quoting, "A gambling instinct has gripped retail investors." The regulators are trying to build more guardrails to protect the retail investor in India, but clearly a lot more needs to be done. The thing is, Indian markets are growing and retail investors are maturing, which is all good. But stocks are instruments to build long-term wealth. It is not a shortcut to instant riches, especially if you don't know what you're doing. And this kind of trading also poses a threat to market stability. A surge in such trades could steer the market away from generating wealth for its investors and turn it into a casino. This is a long-term risk and it cannot be ignored. Staying with India, there's a change of guard in the national capital. Arvind Kejriwal has resigned as Delhi Chief Minister. He's also handpicked his successor, a trusted aide, Atishi. Now, this caps months of political drama. We had charges of corruption, the first ever arrest of a sitting chief minister, a dramatic bail application, and now this, a sudden resignation by Arvind Kejriwal. He's proven to be an astute tactician in the past. The question is, will he succeed again, or has he misread the public sentiment? Let's look at the timeline first. Arvind Kejriwal was arrested by the Enforcement Directorate, or ED, in the month of March. He was accused in the alleged liquor scam. You see, the Delhi government had allowed private players to sell liquor. All they needed was a license. Now, the ED says that this license was sold for commissions, that Kejriwal and his team took bribes for licenses. First, the Deputy Chief Minister of Delhi was arrested. Then in the month of March, Kejriwal himself was taken in. He got bail from the top court in July, but by then he had been arrested by a different agency, the CBI, or the Central Bureau of Investigation. That bail plea was heard by the Supreme Court last week and Kejriwal was granted bail. He could technically stay on as Chief Minister, but he could not visit the CM's office. That was the top court's condition. So what did Kejriwal do? He threw a googly. He announced that he would resign as Chief Minister and that he would return only after he got an honesty certificate. From whom? The people of Delhi.
आप अगर मेरे को अपराध का एक एक वोट मेरी ईमानदारी का सर्टिफिकेट होगा, अगर आप मेरे को वोट देके जिताओगे और अगर आप कहोगे कि केजरीवाल ईमानदार है, तो चुनाव के बाद उसके बाद जाके मैं सीएम की कुर्सी पे बैठूंगा, तब तक मैं सीएम की कुर्सी पे नहीं बैठूंगा.
Both Kejriwal and Atishi met Delhi's Lieutenant Governor today. Atishi staked claim to become Chief Minister. She's expected to be sworn in within 2 or 3 days. But the reactions were muted. She said Kejriwal would always be Delhi's Chief Minister.
जितना सुख आज मेरे मन में है, आज उससे बहुत ज़्यादा दुख भी मेरे मन में है. दुख इसलिए कि दिल्ली के लोकप्रिय मुख्यमंत्री मेरे बड़े भाई अरविंद केजरीवाल जी आज इस्तीफा दे रहे हैं. मैं आज ये ज़रूर कहना चाहती हूँ आम आदमी पार्टी के सभी विधायकों की तरफ से, दिल्ली की 2 करोड़ जनता की तरफ से, कि दिल्ली का एक ही मुख्यमंत्री है और उस मुख्यमंत्री का नाम अरविंद केजरीवाल है.
So why Atishi? Well, loyalty is her biggest plus point. Atishi joined the Delhi cabinet in March 2023. That's after Deputy Chief Minister Manish Sisodia was arrested. She held the Education, Finance and Public Works ministries, all key for Kejriwal's party, the Aam Aadmi Party, or AAP as they're called. She also became the loudest critic of the liquor case probe. Whether it was at press conferences or street protests or social media messages, Atishi was at the forefront of the Aam Aadmi Party campaign, which is why Arvind Kejriwal has now picked her. At 43 years of age, she will be the youngest Chief Minister in India, also the second woman Chief Minister in the country. But I doubt the symbolism will sell. After all, she herself says that Kejriwal is the real CM. The opposition BJP is also calling her a puppet. But what happens next? Well, Delhi goes to polls after February 2025. So Arvind Kejriwal has a couple of options. He can let Atishi complete the Aam Aadmi Party government's term until February next year. Meanwhile, he can also use this time to build a campaign. Less focus on governance, more focus on politics. Perhaps even expand his footprint to other states. Haryana, for instance, is going to polls in October. The Aam Aadmi Party is contesting all 90 seats in that state. Kejriwal was born in Haryana, so he may devote more time to the upcoming election there. The Aam Aadmi Party has already won Punjab and Delhi. No reason they cannot make inroads in Haryana. That's the first possibility. Or he can try to call for early elections in Delhi. Aam Aadmi Party leaders say that is the plan, but it's not a guarantee. the Chief Minister can ask the Lieutenant Governor to dissolve the assembly, to basically hold snap elections in Delhi. But the final decision belongs to the Lieutenant Governor. He is not bound by the Chief Minister's advice. So the elections may or may not happen immediately. And all of this is on point for Kejriwal. His comfort zone is the Delhi electorate. Whenever he's had trouble, he's fallen back on the voters here. Just think back to 2013. Delhi delivered a hung verdict. Arvind Kejriwal formed a government with support from the Congress party. But in 2014, he resigned. He said the coalition was hampering his work. So elections were held again in 2015. And guess what? Aam Aadmi Party won 67 out of 70 seats. In 2020, they nearly repeated that win. The party won 62 out of 70 seats in Delhi. So Arvind Kejriwal trusts the voters of Delhi. He believes that they will give him yet another landslide. And if they do, he will get his honesty certificate. It's classic Kejriwal, dramatic and high stakes. He's turning the election into a referendum on his innocence. If he pulls it off, he can claim vindication. He can say, I resigned, but the people want me back. Chances are that could happen. The Delhi BJP does not have a prominent leader at the moment. They frankly don't look ready for a campaign. Meanwhile, the Aam Aadmi Party cadre is all fired up. So Kejriwal's bet may pay off in the end. But it does make you wonder about one thing. Whatever happened to promises of a party with a difference? In the US, all the focus remains on the Trump shooting. The former president may be unhurt, but it is hurting the country's politics. The US seems more divided than ever. On Monday evening, Trump appeared on a live event on X. He talked about the shooting. He lauded the Secret Service for doing a great job. And who did he blame? Political foes. He did not name anyone, but we all know who he's hinting at. Meanwhile, the FBI says the shooter was hiding for 12 hours near Trump's golf course. There's new body cam footage showing his arrest. Our next report brings you the details.
Today, Donald Trump was in Michigan. He's hit the campaign trail. It's like nothing has changed, except everything has. This weekend, the former US president survived an assassination scare.
This is a storybook, any movie.
A gunman tried to kill him. Officials believe the suspect acted alone, but Trump blamed his political rivals, aka Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. He said their rhetoric about him endangering democracy led to this scare. And he's not alone. His vice presidential candidate echoed the same views.
If you tell the American people that this person is the end of democracy, if you tell the American people that this person needs to be eliminated, most of them, thank God, are going to ignore you, but some crazy person is going to take matters into their own hands and actually listen to the crazy rhetoric that you're putting out there.
His new BFF, Elon Musk, thinks the same too. Yesterday, the Tesla CEO tweeted that no one is even trying to assassinate Biden or Harris. He has since deleted the post. Musk says it was intended as a joke, but he's getting the heat for it. The White House has called it irresponsible. This was the second shooting in 2 months, so the spotlight is back on the Secret Service. How did the gunman get so close to Trump? Well, the FBI has presented all the details. Ryan Wesley Routh arrived at the Trump International Golf Club at around 1:59 a.m. local time on Sunday. He hid near the tree-lined fence. Routh had an AK-47 style assault rifle with him, a GoPro camera, and a bag full of food. He waited for roughly 12 hours.
Cellular data shows that the subject was in the vicinity of the golf course roughly 12 hours before the engagement with the United States Secret Service. Our investigative teams conducted a neighborhood canvass in an effort to collect and obtain relevant video footage. The subject had an active online presence, and we are going through what he posted and any searches he conducted online.
It was when Trump was preparing for his birdie putt that a Secret Service agent started visually sweeping the area. He spotted Routh on the other side of the fence and fired at him. Trump was whisked away and the gunman escaped the scene.
Steps to your right!
It was only after 40 minutes that police finally caught him. New body cam footage of that moment has emerged. It shows Raut walking backwards. His shirt is over his head. His hands are on his head before they are handcuffed.
What's your name, boss? Ryan?
The suspect has since appeared in court. The police have charged him with 2 federal gun-related crimes. The FBI has praised the Secret Service, and so did Donald Trump.
It was quite something, but it worked out well, and Secret Service did an excellent job. And they have the man behind bars, and hopefully he's going to be there for a long time. Dangerous person, very, very dangerous person.
The November election is only weeks away. Kamala Harris still has a slight edge in the polls. A new poll shows her leading with 49%, while Trump is at 46%. This is largely due to major support from women voters. But even then, her advantage remains within the margin of error. Will these repeated assassination attempts on Trump tip the scales in his favour? Well, we'll find out soon.
The United Nations General Assembly will be in session soon. September 23rd to 27th will be a so-called high-level week. Leaders from all over the world will be flying to New York. They will be gathering for a week of intense tongue-wagging, with little to show afterwards. That's probably what is going to happen anyway. India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi will be heading to the US as well, but he has decided to skip the main UNGA hoopla. He has other matters to attend to. Modi will attend a session of the Quad. That's a grouping of India, Japan, Australia and the US. It tackles security in the Indo-Pacific. The Indian Prime Minister will attend a Quad summit in Delaware on the 21st of September before he heads to New York, where he will pay a courtesy call to the United Nations to attend a special session before the main UNGA. It's called the Summit of the Future. Prime Minister Modi is expected to speak at this summit on Monday before heading back to India the following day. The United Nations is increasingly becoming obsolete because it refuses to reform and embrace modern realities. Let me give you one of the latest examples. The US recently said it wants to reform the UN Security Council. It wants to bring in new permanent members, and this should be a big deal. For those of you who don't know, the Security Council is the United Nations' top security body. The UNSC decides on peacekeeping operations, on sanctions. It can authorize military action in any country. The council is made up of 15 members. 5 of them are permanent members: the US, the UK, France, Russia and China. These 5 are permanent. The other 10 members are temporary. They're chosen from the rest of the world and serve 2-year terms. That is the current composition of the UN Security Council, and there's a stark disparity here. The permanent members all have a veto. They can shut down any decision they do not like. They can stop any resolution for passing, even if the 14 other members all agree. One permanent member can stop it. The permanent members can always get their way. Now, with this in mind, look at the reform proposed by the United States.
In addition to non-permanent memberships for African countries, the United States supports creating 2 permanent seats for Africa on the Council. It's what our African partners seek, and we believe this is what is just. I'm also proud to announce that the United States supports creating a new elected seat on the Security Council for small island developing states. That in addition to the countries we long supported for permanent seats, India, Japan, and Germany.
On the surface, that sounds great. The Security Council is dominated by the winners of the Second World War. It happened in 1945. The world today is a very different place, so the Security Council should reflect this new world. It should reflect our current realities. But before you congratulate the United States on doing the right thing, take a look at this.
We've been very, very clear that we do not support expansion of the veto. We don't want to give up our veto power. And we do think if we expand that veto power across the board, it will make the council more dysfunctional.
And we are back to square one. You know those companies that make up new random job titles to give employees the feeling that they're moving up the ladder? Executive this, associate that, deputy to the vice overlord of purchasing. The new Security Council seats sound like that. The UN version of those bogus titles. America says it supports permanent seats for Africa, India and the others, but in reality, they aren't willing to share any real power. South Africa's President Cyril Ramaphosa summed it up well.
We would argue that we too, those who are added, must also enjoy the same right that the 5 permanent security members have. We cannot have second-class participation as Africa on the UN Security Council.
India shouldn't have second-class participation either, nor should any other new permanent member. But the present Security Council probably won't listen. They'll do everything they can to cling on to power. It's their exclusive club, and they don't want anyone else to enter. India's External Affairs Minister, Dr. S. Jaishankar, spoke about this recently, about the West's habit of making exclusive clubs and their distrust of other associations, like the BRICS grouping, which has been garnering a lot of interest.
Why this club, and do you consider that the BRICS will expand?
Well, to be honest, why the club? Because there was another club. It was called the G7, and you wouldn't let anybody else into that club. So we said we go and form our own club.
That addresses the root of the problem. With every Western-led institution, the rest of the world feels excluded and compelled to look elsewhere to get anything meaningful done. America's latest UNSC stunt reinforces this belief, and the rest of the world is tired of it. While in the US, Prime Minister Modi will also address the Indian diaspora. The event has been planned in Long Island for this Sunday, but just ahead of it, there's been a disturbing development. A Hindu temple has been vandalized there. The vandals used spray paint and inscribed hate messages on the temple's driveway. They were directed at the Indian Prime Minister. Of course, India has issued a strong response. It has called this act of vandalism unacceptable. But the incident also raises security concerns ahead of the Prime Minister's visit. In a country where polarizing politics has sharply divided the people and anti-India elements like Khalistanis are given patronage in the name of freedom of expression. Here's a report.
Another temple has been targeted in America. The BAPS Swaminarayan Temple in New York. It was vandalized. Temple authorities found hate messages spray-painted on the temple's entrance. They were directed at India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi. In a few days, the Indian Prime Minister will be in New York. He plans to address the Indian diaspora at a venue barely 28 kilometers away from this temple. Ahead of the visit, Indian diplomats are demanding strong action from US law enforcement agencies. They reached out to the local community and spoke to local authorities. The vandalism has been condemned by a range of US lawmakers, from Brian Fitzpatrick to Neeraj Antani, Tom Suozzi, and Ro Khanna. They were all quick to condemn the attack on the temple in New York. Local groups like the Hindu American Foundation have highlighted the recent attacks in Canada and the US on X, as well as some fresh threats issued by Khalistanis like Gurpatwant Singh Pannu. Pannu has been sanctioned by India. He allegedly released a video recently where he threatened Indian institutions as well as the Hindu American Foundation. Prime Minister Modi will kick off his America visit next week. It's a high-profile visit. On the 21st of September, he will begin his trip in Delaware, where US President Joe Biden is hosting him and other leaders of the Quad for a summit. He'll leave for New York on the same day, where he has multiple engagements planned. Besides the address to the Indian diaspora, the Prime Minister is expected to meet top American business leaders and attend the United Nations Summit of the Future. In recent days, America has been making headlines for its deepening political polarization. This divide has only been magnified by the recent attempt on Donald Trump's life. This was the second such incident in as many months. The attacks on Hindu temples and the apparent free rein to extremists only highlight America's brewing vulnerabilities within.
Now let's turn our attention to Europe. The continent is in crisis. Almost every country you go to, you'll hear the locals complain about the same thing: illegal migration. For years, Europe would pride itself on its open borders. Back in 2015, it opened the gates to over 1 million asylum seekers. At the time, there were celebrations. But now the mood has turned sour. Europe has been suffering economically, especially over the last 4 years because of the Wuhan virus pandemic and then the war in Ukraine. Both events dealt a blow to the European economy. They brought hardships to the locals, and this has turned Europeans against immigrants. They say that if they cannot take care of themselves, how are they supposed to take care of refugees? And this sentiment has been brewing in Europe, and it has led to the rise of anti-immigration politics. Parties considered far right have been gaining traction because of their anti-immigration rhetoric. Parties like the National Rally in France and the Alternative for Germany party. The AfD, in fact, recently won a major victory in the German state elections. They emerged as the biggest party in the state of Thuringia. It seems that this was a wake-up call. It was the first time that a far-right party won a German state election since 1945, since the end of the Second World War, since the Nazi Party. This seems to have alarmed the German government and forced them into taking action. So Germany has reinstated border checks. The police will now randomly check people at the country's northern and western borders. People coming in from France, Belgium, Luxembourg and Denmark. The Germans already had some border controls in place with Poland, the Czech Republic, Austria and Switzerland. Now there will be checks at every border and possibly even more scrutiny in the days to come. The move has drawn positive reactions.
I think it's fine. I actually think it's very good because we here in the border areas suffer particularly from crime, and it can't be right that everyone comes in as they can and want to and nothing is done about it. At some point, you have to think about your own population.
It reminds me of when I was younger, when there were frequent border controls. It's a good thing, I think, because of all the problems we have with immigration. It's the same as in France. They should do the same. They're absolutely right.
So border controls are making a comeback, but that will address just one issue. They may stop immigrants from moving between European countries, but it won't stop migrants from getting to Europe altogether. European countries want to address this too. They want to stop migrants before they reach European shores. And one country has been doing this successfully: Italy. Their Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has reduced immigration. Migrant arrivals are down by 60% compared to last year, 60%. This has caught the rest of Europe's attention. So yesterday, Meloni got her first prospective student, Britain's Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
I'm here to have discussions here at this coordination centre and with the Prime Minister about how we deal with unlawful migration. And here there's been some quite dramatic reductions, so I want to understand how that came about.
Starmer met Meloni in Rome yesterday. They discussed ways that the UK could stop illegal immigration, especially boats carrying migrants across the English Channel. And there was something else that was discussed, something quite ironic.
We also agree on the fact that we must not fear exploring new solutions. We talked about the Italy-Albania agreement, which is a solution that the British government is showing a lot of interest in.
Starmer discussed Italy's Albania deal with Meloni. For those of you who don't know, Italy is building migrant centers in Albania. Albania is a country in the Balkans. It is a European nation, but it's not a European Union member. Now, Italy plans to send asylum seekers to Albania. Their asylum requests will be processed at the migrant centers. And if approved, these people will be allowed back into Italy. If not, the migrants will be sent back home or to some safe third country. If any of this sounds familiar, it's because the UK had a similar plan. The last British government under Rishi Sunak wanted to send migrants to Rwanda in Africa. Starmer came to power in July and he scrapped the Rwanda plan immediately. But now Italy is doing the same thing, just in Albania instead of Rwanda, and suddenly Keir Starmer is all ears because Italy has successfully curbed immigration. If Starmer does adopt the Albania plan, I'm sure he's going to get a lot of flack. But the fact that he's even listening is a signal. Starmer's Italy visit, Germany's border checks, they're part of the same pattern. European governments have finally realized that illegal immigration is not sustainable. All European parties will now try and stop people from coming in. Because if they don't, they know that if they don't, the people will elect someone else who will. Now to Amazon, the company has a new diktat for workers, return to office. Until now, Amazon had a hybrid policy. Workers had to be in office only for 3 days a week. The other 2 days, they could work from home. But the company wants to end that. It wants workers in office for all 5 days of a work week. Their CEO announced this change on Monday. It will be implemented by 2nd January. So there's still time, but why the change at all? Well, Amazon says it will help them, that physical presence in office will improve the company's culture. So it wants everyone in office. And what happens if employees do not follow this? Well, it can derail their careers at Amazon. They may lose out on promotions. That is the company's warning. Of course, it leaves workers with little choice. And this has been a point of debate for some time now. Work from home or work from office or a mix of both. Which is better? Which gives the best results? It's been a contentious topic for the last 3 years. And we can see why. Until the Wuhan virus hit the world, we only knew one form of working from office. But the pandemic forced a hard reset. Working from home became the new normal. It was a global experiment and the results were surprising. Productivity was not hit as feared, and business operations went on as usual, more or less. But then the world opened up and companies came up with a bright plan. Why not combine the best of both? Thus came hybrid working, a few days in office and the rest at home. What's not to like? But now companies are tired of it. Look at this survey of nearly 1,000 companies. 9 out of 10 want employees back in office, 9 out of 10. And they're using all kinds of tactics for it. Some are drawing red lines. If workers don't agree, they can leave. 28% threaten to fire employees who do not comply. Some companies are even willing to lose top talent. Their motto is quite simple: no one is indispensable. And if that's not bad enough, some are resorting to surveillance. They're using badges and webcams to keep tabs on workers. It's a controversial approach. Obviously, not everyone is going down this route. Some are taking baby steps, like offering salary hikes, like in the United States, where companies are offering an average of $82,000 for in-person roles. This is for white-collar jobs. $82,000 is the average for in-person roles. It's a 33% increase since last year. And this is in contrast to fully remote roles, which pay an average of $75,000. You see the gap here. And in some cases, companies are hiring psychologists to understand how to get workers back to their desks. It does sound like a lot of effort. So the question is, what's in it for these companies? Why do they want people back in office? Let's look at the economics. Most companies believe return to office is profitable. This is what they believe. 81% think that it increases revenue. Then there's the productivity debate. They insist that workers are more productive when in office. 83% of the companies surveyed agree on that. 81% think that it improves company culture. Then there's infrastructure. Most big companies already have huge offices. They either own these spaces or have long-term rent contracts for exorbitant amounts. Fortune 500 companies are wasting almost $25 million a year on unused office space. They don't want this money to be wasted. Does that mean it's the end of remote working? Well, not really. Companies may want workers back, but employees are not so excited about this, because now they're used to the flexibility of remote work and it saves them the time and effort of a daily commute to office. An average Indian spent 59 minutes a day to commute one way to work. Who wouldn't want to use that time better? So some are jumping ship to avoid work from office mandates, like top brass employees at X, Microsoft and SpaceX. Others are opting for lower salaries. They prefer a lesser pay than a return to office. What does this tell you? You cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach. Each company and industry will have to figure out the best model for itself. As the world moves on, the economics of work will also evolve. Offices will not disappear, remote working may not be so attractive. So the key is to find a balance, something that works for both sides, the company and the employees, instead of trying to force each other's hand. Our next story tonight is about a mass slaughter. Zimbabwe wants to cull 200 elephants to feed its citizens. Southern Africa is facing its worst drought in decades. There is not enough food to eat. 68 million people are affected, including nearly half of Zimbabwe's population. So the government wants to kill its elephants to address acute hunger. This is a first for the country since 1988, and it follows neighboring Namibia's decision. Last month, they approved the slaughter of 700 wild animals, including 83 elephants. The culling plans are controversial, but can they solve Africa's woes? Here's a report.
Malawi, Zambia, Namibia, Lesotho and Zimbabwe. Southern Africa faces a severe drought. Crops are wiped out. There are acute food shortages. 68 million people are at risk, including nearly half of Zimbabwe's population.
This is by far the worst drought in years. Ever since I was born, I have never seen such a drought. This year it's too much. We are going to starve. We were expecting that we would harvest and sell to the national granary, but that will not happen. The heat was just too much.
Zimbabwe is suffering from its worst drought in 4 decades. People are staring at acute hunger. So the country has authorized mass slaughter. They plan to kill 200 elephants. Why? To feed the citizens. The cull is a first in the country since 1988, and it follows Namibia's recent decision. Namibia too faces a drought, and last month they decided to cull 700 wild animals, including 83 elephants, again to distribute meat to the people facing hunger. Since the announcement, more than 150 animals have already been killed, and nearly 57,000 kilograms of meat have been distributed. Both Namibia and Zimbabwe have stirred a controversy. Animal rights advocates are furious. But the countries remain undeterred. In fact, Zimbabwe says by killing the elephants, they will hit 2 birds with 1 stone. Southern Africa is home to one of the largest elephant populations. More than 200,000 elephants live across just 5 countries: Zimbabwe, Zambia, Botswana, Angola and Namibia. Among these countries, Botswana has the highest elephant population, followed by Zimbabwe, making its elephant population the 2nd largest in the world. The country's conservation parks can sustain only 55,000 elephants, but they are home to 84,000 elephants. So the government wants to decongest the parks, and the culling, they say, will be a drop in the ocean. With this, they have made conservation biologists and animal rights advocates furious, who say that elephants have a right to exist and that there has to be a better way. But Zimbabwe is working on a tight schedule. Amid the severe drought, they have to feed people, and they fear that without food, it's not just the humans who will suffer, but also elephants. The drought may escalate human-wildlife conflicts because resources will become scarcer. Last year, 50 people were killed in elephant attacks in Zimbabwe. This year, 31 people have died so far. So, controversy or not, Zimbabwe is stomping forward with the plan to kill their elephants.
$10 trillion. That's how much money the world loses each year. Do you know why? Because we do not educate young women. Let me repeat that. This is the annual global cost of not investing in women's education, $10 trillion. I'm not making this up. The United Nations has released a new report. It shows that the world is missing out on economic gains because our governments are failing to invest in women and girls. And the $10 trillion are just the tip of the iceberg. Let's look at another example, the global digital divide. In low-income countries, 90% women do not have access to the internet. Globally, 37% do not use the internet. That's 259 million women without access to the internet. There is a glaring digital gender gap, and it will cost us. Do you know how much? $500 billion over the next 5 years. I could go on. There's a lot of data that basically says the same thing. No matter where you look, there is a gender gap. From the clothes we wear to the food we eat, from our health to our financial stability, from our careers to the chores that we do, gender inequality is everywhere. And women are at the losing end of it. So the world is losing money too. And this is irrefutable. If women are empowered, if we close the gender gap, if we invest in women, our economies will advance. The global GDP will increase by 20%. And we already know this. Yet this is what our world looks like. No country has a comprehensive framework to bridge gender inequality. Of the 120 countries where data is available, more than half prevent women from doing the same jobs as men. 2.4 billion women do not have the same economic rights as men. Globally, women make 80% of what a man makes for the same job. They earn less than men. Only 40 countries ban sexual harassment in public, and every week, women spend 21 more hours of unpaid work. In monetary terms, that's 40% of the GDP of some countries. At the current rate, it will take us more than 169 years to close the gender gap. 169 years. How is this okay? We have to invest in women, and we have to do it now. Not just because it is common sense, but also because it makes economic sense. Because here's what will happen next. If we invest in women's education, the global economy will gain $10 trillion. If more women work, that's another boost of $7 trillion. If female farmers get more support, add $1 trillion to that figure. If women stop losing their jobs due to violence, either at home or at work, you can add another $1.5 trillion. If healthcare for women improves, that's another $1 trillion. These are all research-backed numbers. Clearly, investing in women is a good idea. So what is holding us back? Like I said, governments are not putting their money where their mouth is. They're not making the requisite investments. That is one big problem. But research shows that the gains far outweigh the investment. Look at healthcare. Women don't get the same benefits as men. So they're in poor health 25% longer than men. That's the average. Let's say we invest $1 on their healthcare. Do you know the return for the economy on that $1? $3, that's your return, because the woman's quality of life improves, so participation in the workforce also increases. Now look at medical research. For decades, it has focused on men. But if we invest $300 million in research on women, it will yield $13 billion in economic returns. So the returns are far bigger than the investment, and this applies across the board. Moral of the story? The world needs to invest in women. Gender equality is the need of the hour. It should not just be a moral, but also a strategic and economic priority, because empowering women is smart economics. Are you a Manchester City fan? If you are, look away right now. The club is facing charges linked to financial violations in Britain, around 115 charges in total. All of them cover a period of 9 years, around the time when Abu Dhabi's ruling family bought the club. And what happens if they lose? Well, they could be docked points, maybe get fined, or even relegated from the Premier League. Of course, that last one is an extreme case. City fans will be hoping the club is exonerated after the trial. The last thing they want is a scandal. City have won 6 out of the last 7 Premier Leagues. Frankly, only a court case can stop them. Rival fans are hoping for exactly that. They're dumping memes on the upcoming City verdict.
trouble.
We're also counting down to Sri Lanka's presidential election. They're scheduled for the 21st of September. This will be the first election since the financial crisis of 2022, so the stakes are pretty high, and we'll be covering the polls from Colombo for you. The ground situation, the major issues, the leading candidates and the impact on India. So stay tuned for the special edition of Vantage from Sri Lanka starting tomorrow. And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. In Sao Paulo, a mayoral candidate throws a chair at his opponent during a debate. Firefighters battle raging wildfires in Portugal. And items from the iconic 90s sitcom Friends go up for auction to mark the show's 30th anniversary. Finally, we're taking you back in history. On this day in 1978, the Camp David Accords were signed, brokered by then-American President Jimmy Carter between Egypt's Anwar Sadat and Israel's Menachem Begin. The accords had two main outcomes. Israel withdraws from the Sinai Peninsula and Egypt becomes the first Arab country to recognize Israel. We're leaving you on that note. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow for our Vantage special edition from Colombo.
Nosso comercial.